This is Sir Alex Ferguson, the undisputed king of Manchester United, with a cabinet overflowing with trophies, including 13 league titles and 2 European Cups. As such, he is rightly considered one of the finest managers to have ever stepped off a touchline anywhere in the world. In all of this, though, there's another side of the coin to his story. He had a way with words, players, the whole shebang, and when he didn't get his way, things would get out of hand. A bit of an understatement, if you ask us. Fergie was a Glasgow boy through and through, where football was more than a game. It was life. That kind of passion had driven him to the top at Aberdeen and then United. His drive for the game and that managerial glory turned him into a bit of a tyrant, though. You couldn't argue with his success, mind you, but the way he treated some of the lads, well, that was just a bit over the top. Adding to his legendary status, Fergie also had a reputation for his volcanic temper and a bit of cold-hearted manipulation in the works. His hairdryer treatment was the stuff of legend to all the players and opponents. It was one of the worst tempers the game has ever seen, and it led to some of the most jaw-dropping moments in football history. The gaffer had some of the most heated quarrels with the biggest football stars you could imagine. But before we unleash Fergie's fiery temper, make sure to like and subscribe. Now, back to the video. Then there's the whisper that Fergie had a knack for bending the rules in his favour. Some say he used to bully refs into giving United more time at the end of games, what they call Fergie time. That really got going after a wild game in 1993, where United scored a last-minute winner against Sheffield Wednesday to go top of the league. But it really blew up after the 1999 Champions League final, where United scored twice in injury time to win the cup. Whether or not this is a fact, one thing is for sure. Fergie knew a thing or two about working a crowd to his advantage. They say you never meet your heroes, but we all wanted to know what would happen if an unstoppable force met an immovable object. Well, for 12 years at Manchester United, we did. Roy Keane, the hardhead, and Sir Alex Ferguson, the even harder-headed football manager, struck gold from the very beginning. Roy Keane and Fergie were united from 1993 to 2005, the former being the crème de la crème of perfect matches, winning 7 Premier League titles together with 4 FA Cups and a Champions League in 1999. Keane was Captain Fantastic, and he led the side to glory 8 out of a dozen years. But, like all great relationships, even this one was fated to turn sour. Just like bread goes stale and butter goes rancid, their partnership eventually ran into a wall. Keane was Fergie's right hand, the intermediary, the voice of the gaffer in the dressing room. While everyone in the preceding sentence has a huge personality and an even bigger ego, it was Keano who had the courage to voice things out. He kept everybody on their toes, and that's exactly what Fergie wanted. Keano seemed destined to make a glorious exit at United. In and around Old Trafford, everyone felt the same. Then, 2005 happened. The cracks in the relationship with Fergie were growing bigger with every passing day. Then they went under. Roy Keane said he couldn't go into the details of what happened in the meeting. He said Keano had gone off on one about a few of the lads on the club's TV channel, and Fergie wasn't happy, so he called a meeting. Keano said, "Let's watch it together," so we all piled into Fergie's office, coaches, the boss, and the whole squad. I was only 18 or 19 at the time. We watched it, and then Keano asked if anybody had a problem with what he'd said. Everyone just sat there. To be honest, it wasn't that bad. I think it was more about the history between Keano and the gaffer. So, all thought to head to his office and have a chat with Fergie and sort stuff. But things went haywire. Something brutal was going to brew in that office room, and it was Sir Alex's uncontrollable rage. It started off with a small argument between the gaffer and Roy Keane. A few under-the-belt insults here and there, and boom. The tension in the room became thick enough to cut with a knife. Things escalated. Words started being thrown around like confetti, and it was readily apparent that things were going to spill over the pot. Then, all of a sudden, Fergie absolutely broke loose. He leaped up out of his desk, looking like a man on a mission. It was literally as if one sees a car crash happening in slow motion. I just couldn't believe my eyes. The gaffer was going absolutely berserk. His neck veins were popping out, and it took a couple of the lads to restrain him. It really was out of the blue in that sense. We'd all seen him have his moments, but this was on another level entirely. It was like trying to witness a volcano erupt. The following day, Keanu turned up at Carrington as if nothing was wrong, but he was out of there quicker than you could shout, Manchester United.
It happened so quickly, but his actions were so quick. For one reason or another, he decided to go and criticise his teammates. And so most of you have not seen that video, but you couldn't release it. We couldn't release it. Ended up with two of the young players being booed before the game in Paris on the Wednesday. And we decided we had to do something. The meeting in the room was, it was horrendous, and I just couldn't lose my control in this particular situation. And if I had let it pass and allowed it to happen, I think the players would have viewed me differently, more differently than I would have liked to have.
And that was that. 12 years of blood, sweat and tears all came crashing down. The most iconic duo in football had a very violent end. Yes, he did receive a $5,000 fine for the rant, but the true punishment came in that car park when Fergie told him to leave the club. This had been simmering for years, and this was the showdown that was always going to come. Everybody knew the relationship was beyond breakdown. For a change, both of them were singing from the same hymn sheet. To cut it succinctly, Roy Keane was certainly a firebrand, but the control freak in Ferguson was akin to a shepherd in a never-ending quest, trying to keep the flock together. The only thing is, you can't domesticate wolves in sheep's clothing, not that Roy Keane was a villain. It is just that Ferguson didn't learn how to step down for once, and heck, listen. The rest of the sheeple, as always, would cap their heads down as if Sir Alex was their military sergeant. Yes, sir. No, sir. That's about it. Things appeared to have cooled down eventually after all the drama, but it turns out Keanu broods the most. In 2019, he spilled the beans in a podcast, saying he would never forgive the gaffer for the way he was shown the door. Roy Keane said all that carry-on about him upsetting everybody was a load of old cobblers. He's not going to take rubbish from anyone, least of all Fergie. If the Pope gave him stick, he'd still stand up for himself. He reckoned if Fergie apologised, he might give him a nod, but a deep-seated heart-to-heart is out of the question. Keanu says David Gill, the big boss of the club at the time, and Fergie sat him down and basically told him to get lost. The worst bit, they couldn't remember how long he'd actually been there. That's spit-in-the-face territory, mate. A legend like Keanu, and they couldn't get the basics right.
And for him to criticise that when you think of what he made out of it, he made millions of pounds on it, He got his statues, he's got his stand named after him. To come back and then criticise. Again, I said at the time, I wasn't too bothered about myself, but to criticise people who brought him success was just ridiculous. So would I ever forgive him? I don't know. Listen, I don't know. We'll see if we ever cross paths again. I'm sure we will. Cross paths, I mean.
We can't talk about Sir Alex Ferguson's antics without mentioning his quarrel with David Beckham. But how did it all begin? The coupling of David Beckham and then Victoria Adams, later to be known as Posh Spice, was one made perfectly under the canopy of stars in celebrity heaven. Their relationship, forged in the late 1990s, would really come to define an era and in many ways shape the trajectory of both their careers.
There's a picture of you there, signing with Alex Ferguson. What was it like when you signed that?
Just brilliant. Signing the paper and it. Just couldn't believe it was happening.
It all started with Beckham wanting to work with his childhood footy hero, Sir Alex Ferguson. On the pitch, Bex looked up to Fergie, who'd shown you could win big by giving young lads a chance. Although the kid had an engine like a Duracell bunny, off the field is where he would start to rub some people the wrong way at Old Trafford, with Fergie as the king. He recalls in his autobiography how he signed on the dotted line with super agent Tony Stevens, who also looked after Alan Shearer among others. Stevens and the gaffer, Ferguson, didn't see eye to eye, and the United boss wouldn't let him in his office, but that didn't put Beck off from picking his own rep. Once Beck jetted off to Ireland on an off day because Vic was there, he didn't think it required telling the gaffer, Ferguson. He received the big freeze from Ferguson when he got back. He knew he was in the doghouse, but that's just the beginning of the story. It happened at a charity football match where the upcoming football star and the pop diva first struck up a conversation. David Beckham was a Spice Girls fan, most especially Victoria, who was oozing with glamour. Their whirlwind romance became the talk of the world. Combining soccer's golden boy with the Princess of Pop was a marriage made in media heaven. Millions witnessed their marriage in 1999. As their individual fame skyrocketed, a staggering level of pressure developed from the glare of publicity, putting huge pressure on their private lives. And you all know that Fergie was something else, right? Then again, let me tell you, behind the tough guy image lay a bit of insecurity. Take when young Bex got hitched, for instance. The lad wanted a couple of extra days on honeymoon with the missus. Fair enough, right? Steve-O, his agent, goes to the gaffer to ask for a favour, but Fergie, bless him, wouldn't have it. He had to have the last word on everything, right down to the plans for the honeymoon. It ended up with Steve-O going over his head to the chairman. That was the kind of control freak he was. It was a marriage of a perfect storm of celebrity, coupled with the demands of their respective careers, which would test the bounds of a relationship sometime later in their existence and create tensions that reverberated through their lives for years to come. Sir Alex Ferguson, however, was having none of it. The seasoned manager, so used to convivial clubs under his tutelage, found the mirthful world of Beckham and the Spice Girls as too much of a contrast. While Victoria Beckham most definitely did add to the mix in the relationship between her husband, Sir Alex Ferguson, and others, it was the unprecedented global stardom of David Beckham that for the most part tested the authority of the manager. No player in the history of English football had ever transcended the boundaries of the game, established a personal brand, and built such an immense following that could rival the club itself. It was a burden too hard, even for someone as traditional as Ferguson, to bear, hence his inability to balance the demands of managing both a global superstar and a high-performance football team. Specifically, Beckham's commercial ventures, his personal image, and his immense following hardly made the case for easy management, even by the most experienced manager. In essence, the club had become too small for the two dominant figures. Sir Alex Ferguson was a master manipulator used to getting his way on the field and off it. He believed in discipline and teamwork above all else, a sentiment clearly at odds with Beckham's superstar status and increasingly personal brand. The relentless media attention and constant speculation, often fueled by the Beckham camp, caused significant friction. As Beckham's fame grew, it overshadowed Ferguson's traditional, regimented approach to management, and this disparity proved too wide to bridge. In a stark show of his no-nonsense management, Sir Alex Ferguson once asked what reason David Beckham did not attend practice and take care of his ill child. This is one of those incidents that clearly show the gap that existed between the old-school values the manager epitomized and his modern, family-centered superstar life. Ferguson's expectation from Victoria Beckham that she be the primary caregiver to their child was testimony to a deep disconnection from emerging roles in parenting, especially in dual-income homes. The fact that Victoria was pursuing an equally demanding career internationally was neither here nor there for the manager. The dropping of Beckham from the team that went out to play against Leeds United was a public flexing of muscles by Ferguson, pushing their equation more in favour of the rumbling fire between them. But Beckham was not going to be upstaged by anybody. His growing popularity and ambition clashed egregiously against Ferguson's iron rule. The coltish young star showed a staying power that was almost indomitable. The two men's psychological duel was played out in public view. Almost every touch was being manipulated. In 2003, though, it could not cope with two big egos at the club at the same time. How did this all sour? 2 words. Spice Girls. 1 more. Golden Balls. The nickname Golden Balls, which David Beckham was christened with by his then-girlfriend Victoria in 2001, proved to be more than just a mere moniker, but came to represent the couple's meteoric rise to fame. Victoria's own rise as a Spice Girl added star power to Beckham's celebrity, resulting in a sort of soap opera tale that kept his football career mostly overshadowed. This made a perfect irritant tantamount to the staunchly conservative Sir Alex Ferguson. The old-school values of Ferguson were at loggerheads with the modern and glamorous image that the Beckhams were grooming. Their lifestyle was pretty much contrary to the ethos of Manchester United, built on working-class values, and hence increased the tension between the manager and star player. It was this mix of Beckham's talent on the field and persona off the field that caused a veritable storm, further driven by the Victoria effect. Ryan Giggs let slip that the stormy relationship between Sir Alex Ferguson and David Beckham was the prime reason for the star's departure from Manchester United. These continued bouts of two so powerful personalities created an extremely toxic atmosphere at the club. The dictatorial management style of Ferguson was much against the new celebrity of Beckham, which only made things difficult for the two with time. Their many arguments acted as a distraction for team morale and thwarted the progress of the club. Finally, Ferguson had to make the harsh decision of letting go of one of his star players to maintain the unity of the club. But at what cost? Sir Alex Ferguson painted him in a horrible light, and well, David Beckham, the poor old chap, got tripped by what was about to come. Former Manchester United player Mikael Silvestre spoke of the infamous row between the manager and David Beckham, in which he came up with a hair-raising account of the scene that played out in the dressing room after a defeat. The relationship between Sir Alex Ferguson and David Beckham was a C4 waiting to explode. Tensions had simmered for years with the manager's iron fist, clashing violently with the player's burgeoning global stardom. And then came February 2003, a date etched in the annals of footballing infamy. Hardly had Old Trafford breathed the bitter pill of a 2-0 thumping in an FA Cup match by North London rivals Arsenal, when some real action unfolded behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, Sir Alex Ferguson, seething, his face as red as a lobster that had been boiled for a long time, frothing with even further rage and humiliation, stormed into the dressing room like a wounded bull. The tension in the atmosphere was literally palpable. Heads bowed, the players knew what was coming, but no one could have predicted the volcanic explosion that was about to erupt. David Beckham, already in the firing line through questionably poor performance, found himself firmly in the crosshairs of the manager's fury. An outburst of verbal sparring ensued, a poisonous exchange of insults and accusations that boiled the temperature in the room. Then there was the moment that would be replayed for years thereafter. In a true fit of pique, a display of temper right on the line between man and animal, Ferguson lashed out. His boot, a lethal weapon in the hands of a man possessed, went sailing through the air with deadly accuracy. The sickening thud as it connected with Beckham's face echoed around the stunned dressing room. Blood streamed from the wound, a crimson blot on the immaculate white of the United costume. It was a scene of carnage, a tableau of violence sure to shock the nation. Beckham, his face a mask of pain and disbelief, appeared in newspapers and television screens everywhere.
First and foremost, I have to stress this, and I've stressed this over my 29 years as a coach. Whatever happens in the dressing room is sacrosanct. An incident which was a freakish, if I tried it 100 times or 1,000,000 times, it could not happen again. If I did it, I'd carry on playing. Anyway, having said that, contrary to all the reports, David did not have 2 stitches put in his head, he had no stitches.
Now it was no longer a football story. It was a grand stage tragedy. Ferguson's actions were a desperate attempt to hold on to control. Publicly humiliating Beckham would reinstall his authority and remind people who's boss. But in that moment of madness, he overplayed his hand. The public, who had grown to adore Beckham, was incensed. That carefully cultivated image of Manchester United being a family club was irredeemably lost. The boot incident was more than a mere physical confrontation. It was a symbolic fight for the heart and soul of the club. The tyranny of Ferguson had finally found its counterweight. The writing was on the wall. Manchester United were facing Arsenal in the FA Cup in a match of high importance. Tempers were flaring as a confrontation ensued between Ferguson and Beckham on the touchline, while Silvestre tried to rationalise the violence by stating things like this happen in dressing rooms. It cannot be condoned. The whole episode speaks of a vicious culture of bullying and fear that was vouched for by Ferguson. His actions had grave consequences, not just for Beckham, but for the rest of the team. The boot incident wasn't just a flashpoint, it was a moment that would reshape the landscape of Manchester United. With Posh Spice by his side, Beckham was a PR masterclass. And there he was, sporting a bandaged brow, a victim of his manager's rage, plastered across every tabloid in the land. It was a PR coup of epic proportions. The public, which had matured in growing fancy over the years for the Golden Boy, came right out in his support. Ferguson was, for a change, totally out of his stride. The man who had ruled Old Trafford with an iron hand was the villain of the piece now. The image of the no-nonsense, hard-nosed Scot, which was shown to the world, was in tatters. He turned from the revered gaffer into a bully with a boot. The Old Trafford hierarchy was put in an enviable position. What could they do? A club founded on discipline and respect was fast turning into a circus. The tension between the manager and his star player was becoming a toxic brew that was poisoning the club. Quite clearly, from the boardroom to the terraces, something had to give. Fergie, never one to give in, stubbornly stuck to his guns to the end. He was quick to call Beckham a troublemaking influence, saying his days at the club were numbered. But even the most unyielding of men has to wave the white flag from time to time. Public opinion was now very much in Beckham's favour. The club's reputation in tatters, Fergie knew there was no option other than to let the Golden Boy go. A year later, in 2004, the steam blew off. Beckham had moved on. Sir Alex stayed where he was. But out of nowhere, reporters started asking questions if Fergie ever apologised to the boot-struck Beck. It's pretty safe to say that things got a bit nasty. Most of us in the Old Trafford boardroom were expecting Fergie to eat a bit of humble pie after giving Becks a boot to the head. The lad had become a national hero after that free kick against Greece, hadn't he? But no, the old gaffer was having none of it. He snapped at the photographers like he was foaming at the mouth and then let rip with this. The dressing room is sacrosanct. It's 100% loyalty. It can never be anything other than that. Talk about digging the heels in him. And then came Cristiano Ronaldo, a shy new football legend who was going to be among the biggest names in the game. He was called in by Fergie and arrived in 2003 as the prodigious teenager but raw with talent. Fergie saw something special in him straight away. The rest is history. He went on to become a United legend, scoring goals for fun and winning trophies galore. After a Manchester United match, Sky Sports reporter Jeff Shreves was interviewing young Cristiano Ronaldo, who was by then making a name for himself on the field with his swishy style. The question was about Ronaldo's propensity to go down easily in the box, and that got Ferguson into a furious rage. Fergie's always been a bit of a hothead, and the criticism of his player was too much for him to stand. According to Shreves, Ferguson physically jumped towards me, which tends to paint a very vivid picture of the rather fiery manager losing his temper. Just picture this: the legendary manager, so known for his intense personality, ready to set upon a reporter doing a job. Ronaldo, no doubt, found the whole thing very funny. The over-the-top way Ferguson handled the whole thing was truly movie-like. He stormed out of the dressing room, giving Shreves verbal abuse, trying to intimidate him into backing down. Typical Fergie, always first on the scene in defence of his players, and much quicker, presumably, in his office to apportion blame for those critical of said players. Shrevesy, though, wasn't going anywhere. He stood firm, face to face, and told Ferguson to cool it. It's not often you see someone telling Fergie to cool his jets. The whole incident highlighted just how difficult and unpredictable Ferguson could be. There were so many people in that stadium, and even Dennis Law's daughter had to step in to break up the situation. But Fergie, being the master manipulator he was, didn't let it show. With a calm demeanour, he walked over to Ronaldo, had a quick word, and just like that, Ronaldo was back under control. It was a masterclass in managing, with a demonstration of how much power Fergie had over the biggest stars.
I've spoken it all my life, but I find it hard to understand Alex Ferguson sometimes. So that must have been difficult for you at first.
But I still don't understand him.
Sir Alex Ferguson is now 82 years old. He, of course, has been in retirement since 2013, when he stepped down as the manager of Manchester United. Since stepping down, Ferguson has generally been out of the public eye. He is occasionally spotted at matches, be it at Old Trafford or other grounds, but on the whole, he has been enjoying his time off. In terms of former players, it is a mixed bag. He now gets on with David Beckham and stays in contact with Cristiano Ronaldo. They have remained close, while others, notably Roy Keane, still resent him. There have been public spats and reconciliations, making for some interesting headlines over the years. There you have it. the master manipulator, the great football manager that is Sir Alex Ferguson, who so many times has steered Man United to victory. A wizard of the game, master manipulator, fiery Scotsman, able to turn a dressing room into a war zone. He was the king of Old Trafford, iron-fisted, but with a temper that scared people the most. That's it for this one. If you're a fan of football icons, make sure to check out our other videos.